Hi everyone, for those of you who haven't joined us for an event before with Brasenose and Cats, I'm Katharine, the school's liaison officer at St Catherine's College in Cambridge. My pronouns are she, her, and today we're doing a post-16 subject choices webinar. So this is kind of looking at picking A-level or equivalent subjects. I'm also joined by my colleague.
Hello, my name's Joe. I work at Brasenose College, which is part of the University of Oxford, and like Catherine, I'm the schools officer there.
I'm Josie, my pronouns are she, her. I study French and German. I've just finished my second year, but I'm actually switching to linguistics next year, so I'll be going into my third year next year doing linguistics. I found it really hard to make a decision, and clearly that's something I'm still struggling with in terms of my degree, but I came to a decision eventually, and yeah, happy to answer any questions that you have.
Hi, I'm Lawrence. My pronouns are he, him. I'm at Cambridge doing land economy, and I've just finished my second year as well. When it came to making the post-16 decision, I was really confused until I started looking into specific courses, which is how I ended up finding something so niche as the one I currently do. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but yeah, it all seems to be going well. So feel free to ask me any questions and I'm happy to answer them.
Hi, I'm Liv. My pronouns are she, her. I'm at Oxford and I study biochemistry. And I think I'm the same as Lawrence in that I sort of just looked at websites and it was quite daunting, but it was a good decision in the end. So yeah, I'm happy also to answer any questions on that.
Thanks everyone. Yeah, so hopefully today we're going to give you all the information that you need to know in order to make an informed decision about your post-16 choices. I know we've got some people attending as well who have just made their post-16 choices and they're hoping to start like A-levels or equivalent in September. And they're hoping that this session will give them a bit more info in case you want to switch subjects or you want to drop a fourth A-level or something like that, and just basically make sure that you're going into sixth form or equivalent with the strongest set of subjects possible for whatever you might like to do in the future. We're going to be using the Q&A box today. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box, and either we'll type some answers during this session and some of the more popular questions. So if you want to upvote the questions you want answered, and we'll answer some of the most popular questions aloud at the end. Especially do take advantage of having our student helpers here who can chat about what it was like when they were in your shoes and making those decisions, and also what it was like making university choices later down the line. So yeah, I've put your questions into the Q&A box, and Joe will be keeping an eye on that as well, while I chat, and then I'll look at it while he chats as well. I'm going to take you first through your really basic post-16 choices. So we're going to be looking this session at your kind of academic choices in the future, but there are a range of different things that you can do post-16. So you have to continue some level of study in some way. If you're here today, it's probably because you are planning on going into some study when you turn 16, but you have to continue your studies in some way, and you can combine work and study if you want to. So we've got a whole range of things on the screen. We'll share the slides afterwards as well, but we're going to be looking at the top left, which is A-levels and equivalent, but there are some other more technical qualifications that you can do, like T-levels, which are qualifications designed with employers. You've got BTECs, you've got technical qualifications, and then you can see at the bottom as well, you can combine work and study, so do apprenticeships, things like that, traineeships, supported internships. So you've got these different options. So we always like to say, you know, it's definitely up to you which of the options you go with, but because Joe and I work at universities, we're obviously going to be focusing on the kind of university route side of things. So that brings us when you go into your post-18 choices. So this is when obviously you can branch out, and if you don't like studying, you don't have to again. So you've got work, study, or your combined work and study options here. And today, like I said, we're going to be focusing on that study option in the middle. And in order to study at a lot of selective universities in the UK, so those are like the Russell Group universities, for example, that we've mentioned in previous webinars, then you tend to need A-levels or Scottish Highers or IB or equivalent qualifications. So often things like T-levels, sometimes BTECs, they don't always give you the strongest chance of getting into the selective universities, and we'll chat a bit more about that later. For this slide, I think I'm going to hand over to Joe.
Sorry, just frantically typing in some answers to the very inquisitive year 10s and 11s, which is a great sign. So yeah, lots of questions are coming through. Some of them I think will be answered naturally during the course of the seminar. So it might be we leave some of them and hopefully they'll be answered, and then just bother us and type it in and say, and demand an answer if it's not answered. I think that's probably the best way to do it. But thanks for asking questions so far. Anyway, so why are we doing this? Well, the thing is, if you want to go to university, or you're thinking you might like to go to university, actually your A-level choices or equivalent, IB or whatever it is you end up doing for sixth form, become very, very important, or they can be very important. So it's worth really pausing and thinking about them carefully and seeing them as one of your first kind of massively kind of adult choices that you're going to be making, and seeing it as an exciting thing because you get to choose, and you're kind of in control of your destiny a bit more than you have been in the past. Anyway, so top universities and universities generally, they tend to be interested in whether you're going to be appropriate and enjoy the course. And one of the ways they can do that is checking your A-levels and seeing what you've been doing. And particularly for sciences, sometimes they say you need to be studying this A-level or this subject to even apply for the course. Just an example, medicine. At Oxford, you have to be doing chemistry plus another science. And for lots of people, lots of people do chemistry and biology. So you kind of have to be doing chemistry and another science to even apply. So you can see why it's important. So what we'd really like you to do is look up on UCAS or on university websites what courses you're interested in. And you might not know much about that yet, but you might have an idea, and see what kind of A-levels are either essential or recommended. I'm going to get the students to talk about what A-levels were essential or recommended for their courses in MO, but just a note about BTECs. So BTECs are a very popular qualification. Lots of people take them, lots of people love them. Now they tend to be slightly less kind of in tune with kind of Russell groups of top universities and the courses. Not always, there are people with BTECs at those universities, but it tends to be that A-levels and IB tends to be a bit more appropriate, a bit more kind of academically rigorous, I guess. So bear that in mind. We definitely have students who combine, who have 2 A-levels and a BTEC at Oxford and Cambridge and other top universities, but it's just a bit less common, so just bear that in mind. Anyway, so just keeping it simple for now, starting with Liv and then Lawrence. Can you tell us anything about what A-levels were required, if any, for your courses?
But for biochem, only chemistry. Chemistry is required. And then the other sciences are recommended. There's no specific combination. So I did biology, chemistry, maths, but you can do chemistry, physics, maths, it's not a combination of that.
Yeah, for land economy, there's no specific requirements in terms of what subjects you do for your A-levels, but there are definitely some very useful ones such as geography or economics. But in terms of first year, a lot of courses that aren't very specific actually give you introductory content. So sometimes specific subjects aren't absolutely necessary.
Thanks very much. Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? So some courses at university there's required A-levels, some there isn't, some there's recommended ones. So it's a kind of complex landscape in a way, and it's worth you just having a look and seeing what's out there, not worrying about it, but just being aware that there's these kind of permutations, really. Right. So here's how I think. If you're in year 10 and you haven't picked your A-levels yet, you'll be doing it in maybe 6 months or something. It'll come around quite quickly. Here's a few things to think about. So you have to think about what A-level or equivalent subjects are right for you, and it has to be your choice, as I've said. And we've got four things to think about here. Now, 3 of them are kind of obvious, aren't they? So what A-levels are you enthusiastic about? What do you really want to study? That has to be the question you ask. What might you have like a strength at? What do you think you might be good at? A natural affinity with? So like skill as well as interest. And then, I guess we've got enthusiasm and interest kind of merging with each other, really. So those 3 are kind of obvious. But maybe what you haven't thought about is what career you might be interested in. Now, I'm going to say this with a massive pinch of salt because people often don't know, but when they're at school, what careers they want to do. I wanted to be a deep sea diver. I can't swim, really. And I don't like fish. And I don't like kind of the dark. I really am not appropriate to be a deep sea diver, but I really wanted to be a deep sea diver until I was about 12. Anyway, so people change their career ideas all the time. And the idea of a single career is in a way a bit outdated, unless you want to be a doctor or a lawyer for life. Like, lots of people change careers all the time. But anyway, it might be useful for you to just think that through a little bit and think, well, is there like something I can see myself doing later on in life? Because that can actually help you help formulate your A-level choices. But anyway, lots of people have no idea, and maybe then it's a matter of trying to narrow down your choice and trying to think about, what kind of person am I? Am I more of a scientist? Am I more of an arty, humanity type person? So you might go about it incrementally like that. But one word of warning about trying to select as many A-levels as possible. Universities tend to look for 3 A-levels rather than 4 A-levels. We don't mind if you're doing 4, lots of people do 4, but you might be spreading yourself too thinly if you select 4 A-levels. Now, I'd like to get the helpers involved. Again, I want to know what they want to be when they grow up, and whether that has changed much over the years, and also whether their university choices had anything to do with what they want to be when they grow up. And then also, it'd be interesting to know, I know we've already gone over it a little bit, but if anyone took 4 A-levels. So I think we'll go for the same order, which is Josie, Liv, then Lawrence. Tell us if you have any kind of career aspirations and how that's changed over the years, and whether your your university choices and A-level choices had anything to do with that.
So I'm thinking of maybe law or consulting or something else. I'm definitely not sure, but I'm doing some work experience over the summer in those fields just to get a feel for it. But my A-levels didn't really influence that at all, because especially with something like law, most people don't do law A-level, and I don't even do law as a degree, and I'm still thinking of going into it. So I don't think it really influences that much unless you're doing something vocational like medicine, which requires certain subjects. I really wouldn't say it matters. When you get to university, careers is something you can start thinking about then, or even after that. So I wouldn't let it influence your decision too much.
I wanted to be many different things. I wanted to be a gardener, a fashion designer, a doctor, like so many different things. But I think I agree so much with Joe that I think in like this modern world that we live in now, the idea of a career for life it's not really what happens anymore. And I think for me, it's more about what can I see myself doing for these X amount of years, like in the future. So can you see yourself doing like these A-levels for 2 years, and can you see yourself doing this degree for 3 years? I think that's the way I sort of thought about it, but no plans at the minute. Maybe a yoga instructor, I don't know.
I sort of had no idea going into my degree choice as to what I wanted to be when I was older. I had some sort of vague direction in terms of maybe something research related. I think as I've come into the degree, I've started to think about policy development or think tanks, that sort of vibe. I suppose that's kind of guided somewhat by my A-levels in terms of the influence they've had with me studying politics, for example, but the future is open because of the nature of the degree, I guess. Degrees don't necessarily confine you. So, yeah.
Marvellous, excellent news. Okay, so it's just the main thing about A-levels is what you're going to enjoy and what you're interested in. But then, there's other things that you can consider. You can get your crystal ball out and think about the future a little bit if you like. Okay, I think we're over to Kathryn again now.
I'm going to move on to going a bit more in depth to how much you should let your course choice at university and therefore your A-level choices affect your choice of subject. So a lot of people don't know that there's actually only a very small proportion of jobs out there in the UK at least that require a specific degree. So some things like Joe's mentioned earlier, like being a doctor or being a vet, you do have to have that very niche degree, and so there are quite set A-levels that you'd have to do in order to be able to apply for that at university. But actually, as you can see here, less than 5% of jobs in the commercial world require particular degree subjects. And usually when there are subjects, it's typically something like maths or languages, where obviously, it's going to be difficult to work in German if you can't speak German. But a lot of jobs out there aren't requiring a specific degree. So we've got some people in the chat saying, oh, I'd love to be a journalist, or I want to be an author. What should I be taking at A-level, and therefore what should I be taking as a degree? But you can actually do all sorts of different degrees and then still go into those areas of work. So like Josie mentioned with wanting to maybe go into something legal or consulting, those are things where you can do a conversion course, get extra training, or sometimes you don't even need to do another course afterwards. So I know people who've done things like science courses and then gone into journalism, because you've got so much of that background knowledge, that research, and putting papers together, things like that, that is then really important for journalism, similar to publishing. There's all sorts of different areas that you can go into. You don't have to have a specific degree in order to go on and have a job in that subject. So if you're sat there thinking, well, my passion is religious studies and I want to do something like theology at university, you don't have to worry thinking, oh no, does that mean my only job choices are vicar or something else? You can be kind of confident in the fact that actually you're going to have so many transferable skills from doing that course at university that you could join something like a graduate program and end up going into journalism or into marketing, into publishing, into law, become an author, and you can use all these different skills that you have got. I'm going to give you a few examples of what people have done with different degrees that have left Cambridge University on the next few slides. So I would love for you to use the Q&A box to make this a bit more interactive. So if you could use the Q&A box, I'd love for you to put in the careers that you can think of, the jobs that you can think of, that people who studied history at Cambridge and finished in 2018, what they have gone into. So I'll give you kind of a minute to have a think and put in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll take a look. Someone's gone straight in there for stockbroking. I like that. We've got, yeah, historian, history teacher, medical history, interesting, law, politics, writing, archaeologist, researchers and teachers. Someone's put football. Absolutely, it's never too late to follow your sporting passions. Someone has put bishop. I'm sure you could. Someone's put spy, which I love. I think you would get all the skills that you need there. Work in a museum. Yeah, a good mix of things there. So a lot kind of down the typical history route, but then also a lot of people seeing that there are things like law, movie set designer. Yes, you could absolutely still go into that. Philosopher. So if you have a look here, you can actually see that there are so many different things that these students went on to do. Some of them decided that accountancy and tax was their passion and went into that IT sector. You've got people who went into banking and marketing. You've even got people who went to engineering and architectural consultancy. So you were bang on with the people who said into architecture, management consulting. You've got people who went into law and things to do with health, and a lot of people went into further study and further research as well. So picking something even more niche and kind of carrying that on and doing something like a master's degree or a PhD afterwards. And so you've got all these different options available to you. It's not just, study history and you've only got historian or history teacher. You actually have so many different careers open to you in the UK. So I think here we can see that the biggest chunk, or one of the biggest chunks here, is actually further study and people going into legal training, which is really interesting. So if you are interested in doing something like law afterwards and you do want to be a lawyer, then you don't have to think that your only route into that is by studying law as a degree at university. There are ways to go into that after studying something else first. It's sometimes a bit different for science subjects, so I'm going to have a little look now at what students who studied engineering did. So I want you to do the same thing again. I'd love to see what your thoughts are on what people who studied engineering at Cambridge went into. So a bit different there with something like doing engineering at university. You're thinking of people going into actually then just being an engineer, but put a few of your ideas in. I would love to see them. Of what you think these students might have gone into. We've got architect, aeronautics, we've got telecommunications, civil engineer, mathematician, car design at Mercedes. I like that. Some people have clearly been reading up on what you can do with an engineering degree. Gardener, someone stole one of Liv's dream jobs. Uni professor, product design, lawyer. Yeah, all of these are absolutely things people could go into. Lighting and sound work in theatre or film, absolutely. Product designer, surgeon, that one you might struggle a bit with. Hairdresser, certainly you don't have to stay in engineering. Someone's put deep sea diver. I think they've taken that from you, Joe. Yeah, lots of great ideas here, and lots of them staying in the vein of engineering, as you would expect. And that's certainly the case when we look now at this lovely pie chart. You can see that a greater chunk of them have stayed within the kind of areas that we're doing. So manufacturing and research science, engineering and architectural consultancy, as we would expect. But then you've still actually got a decent amount of people who are going into things like banking and investment. You have got people going into teacher training. You've got a few people going into arts and recreation. So you've still got these other things going on too. You've got people going to social, community and charity. So you don't have to just have your only roots being something very specific to do with engineering. And like I said earlier, if you kind of change your mind, there are all sorts of ways to be going into different career sectors. So I think it's really important that you have that background knowledge when we're talking about subject choices, because your post-16 subject choices are going to have a huge impact on post-18 choices, so university and things like that. So you really want to be making sure that you're picking a subject that you're really passionate about studying at university, and not just because you're kind of straight line just wanting to do a certain job for the rest of your life and thinking you can't do anything else that you're passionate about at university. I'm going to hand over to Joe for this next slide, I believe, and he's going to talk a bit about if you've already got a degree in mind and you're already dead certain on the degree that you'd like to do at university.
Yeah, it's just a quick heads up, really. You can look all of this up, and the UCAS website might be the best place to start, but it's just to give you a few ideas and just to kind of build on what we were saying earlier about how it's sometimes obvious, but not always obvious. So if you want to do medicine, then we've already said how chemistry and another science is like the standard, what most universities look for. Then the other sciences, it tends to be good if you take sciences at A-level, surprisingly enough. You don't necessarily have to take 3 sciences, but it's often a good idea. But then if you do want to do maths at university, then just so you know, further maths is often like recommended and sometimes essential. And I guess we just kind of think, well, if you have the chance to do further maths at your school and you want to do maths at university, but you didn't take further maths, like, well, you'd have thought that you'd be desperate to do further maths. You might be interested in maths at university, but your school doesn't do further maths. But I would honestly talk to your school. They might be able to find a way of helping you do further maths, maybe by arranging it with another local school, or you can do it like as distant learning, maybe with a little bit of help from teachers. So, you know, you can probably find a way to do more maths if that's your thing. But then, yeah, in other cases, it's not always obvious. So if you do economics at Oxbridge, then we don't really mind if you're doing economics at A-level. It's more maths because it's a mathsy course. Sorry, talking about maths way too much. And you know, it's a similar story with a computer science, really. Certainly at Oxford, it's quite a mathsy course, and you often end up doing lots of maths. Yeah, let's get away from maths and look at a few other things. Architecture, someone was asking about that in the chat earlier, and architecture is just such a unique mix of art and science. So you know, often like a combination is what we look for. So it's not always yes, it's quite an unusual mix, that. But then, you know, a lot of the time it is quite obvious. If you want to do history at history at university, then take it at A-level. Same for English, same for geography, and so on. But it's not actually true with law. Someone again was asking that in the chat earlier. We don't mind if you're doing A-level law or not, and in fact, most people are not doing A-level law at A-level when they go on and study at university. So it's an interesting kind of quirk, that one. Do you want to go on to the next slide, Kathryn? Yeah, so we were discussing earlier how lots of people don't know. They just haven't got a clue when they're in year 10 or 11 or 12 what they want to do at university. So if you're in that boat, then there's a few options for you. So it's a bit easier to do if you're more the arts humanities end of things, to keep your options open and to kind of hedge your bets. So you might end up taking 2 art courses and a science course as well at A-level, and that can help keep options open. So that might be a tactic that you employ if you're not sure. You could kind of try and stick with the Keystone subjects, at least for 2 out of 3 of your A levels, for instance. So maths, chemistry, biology, physics, English, geography, history, those kind of very academically rigorous courses. That might be a way of keeping your options open, because so many university courses appreciate you taking those A levels. And I think most of the student helpers A level examples were in that kind of list. Languages, by the way, Josie is included in the Keystone list. And yeah, just a reminder that 3 A levels, if you can excel in 3 A levels, then we see that as better as at being kind of average in 4 A levels, so not spreading yourself too thinly. But another thing you might be thinking about is, well, I'm going to pick these A levels, but then when I'm in year 12, maybe in the middle of year 12, I might have more of an idea about exactly what I want to study at university. And that's very common, it kind of emerges when you're in year 12. And that's where you might be able to pick an EPQ that's relevant to your university course. You don't have to, but it might be a nice option of finding out a bit and exploring a bit more about your university course. So Josie, Liv and Lawrence, did any of you do an EPQ at all? Josie, yeah, it looks like Liv and Lawrence did. So could you tell us about your EPQ, like what they were like? What did you end up studying it, and whether you think it helped you with your university choices?
Yes, I did my EPQ. So I did biology, chemistry, maths A levels, and I knew I sort of was really interested in life sciences, and I'd been reading around the subject and just got really interested in gene therapy, which is like a new fancy technique in the biochemical world. So did it on that, and it was just really useful. It was useful for uni to have to explore the subject in a lot more detail. But yeah, I found it really helpful, and it also allowed me then in my application for university to use that as evidence that I was suited to the course. I think it's a really good way to specialize, especially if you keep your options open with your A-level courses.
Yeah, I also did an EPQ. So my A levels were economics, government and politics, and English language and literature combined. And one of the things I found I came to enjoy was understanding how subjects interact with each other. So that's sort of why I got into land economy, because it's law, economics and policy and how they sort of interact with one another to produce a certain outcome. And my EPQ was actually looking at economics, but economic policy decisions and the impacts of gender linguistics upon those policy decisions. So sort of trying to figure out how different subjects can impact each other. So clearly that naturally fed into sort of my interest in why I would want to study land economy.
Brilliant, yeah. So those are 2 brilliant examples of how you get into year 12 and you can kind of refine what you're interested in, and the EPQ can be just kind of pointed towards that. So it's another way of hedging your bets, I think, because you can choose A levels that are relatively broad and cover lots of different interests, and then specialize with your EPQ, which universities might like to see, and also some universities take it into account with their offers. What I find generally when I talk to people about A-level choices is it's maybe sounds a bit more worrying than it is, because actually people just tend to pick A-levels that they are interested in, and then their university course choice later on down the line just maps onto that. So they're just taking A-levels that they're interested in, and that helps them choose university courses that they're interested in too. So there's some things to think about, but don't be worried about any of this, because it normally works out as long as you're aware of the possibilities. Okay, over to Kathryn, I think.
Thanks, Joe. Yes, I'm going to move on to chatting about how very specifically you can make sure you can keep your options open. So we've had loads of questions of people saying, okay, but I literally have no idea what I want to do at uni yet. So how am I supposed to make these post-16 decisions? So we're going to try and give you a concise overview of how you can keep your decisions open. So this first bit's for people who are interested in arts, humanities and social sciences. So there might be people like Lawrence, for example, who does land economy, people interested in law, people interested in languages, and people who aren't quite sure. So they might be interested in something like archaeology or something like that. And so we've got these keystone subjects here that you really can't go wrong with if you think that that's a kind of subject that you might like to do at university. So we've put here the 4 key ones. It doesn't mean you have to take all 4. It doesn't mean you have to take 3 of any of these either, but just to give you some good ideas of some solid subjects: English literature, history, a language if you're taking a language, and maths actually can be surprisingly useful. For example, going into something like economics or land economy, a lot of people think that it shows different skills. So if you do like maths but you are interested in arts, art subjects too, don't be afraid to keep up with your maths. There are other good choices, but this depends on the kind of area that you might end up going into in future. So these are a bit more niche, but they're still solid subjects. So you've got something like a second language. So a few people in the chat saying if they want to do history, is it okay to do history in like 2 language A levels? Absolutely. You've got things like ancient history. You might have the opportunity to do classics, classical civilization, economics, law, geography, things like that. And that will depend again on the kind of course that you might see yourself going into it in future. And if you're thinking, well, I don't know what university I want to do in future, then just think, like Joe says, about the A levels that you think you might enjoy. And if you're going to enjoy those, then no doubt you would end up kind of seeing yourself going into that direction at university. And there are so many university degrees out there, like for example, sometimes law or something like land economy, that often don't have very specific requirements. So you will still find that there's great things that you can go into. There are a few at the bottom here that are useful depending on the course that you're applying for, but typically a lot of these subjects you can go into at university. So for example, something like psychology or sociology or archaeology, you can often go into these subjects without having done it at A level. So these bottom ones are for if you're interested in that, but by not taking that, you're usually not ruling that out at university. So you can still go and study politics, for example, if you haven't studied politics at A level, which a lot of people don't know at age 14, 15, so they pick it thinking that's the only way they'd ever get into politics, and they realize actually they could study politics at A level at a degree, or they could have even gone into politics afterwards having not studied politics. So don't let these decisions now that you're making, don't let it be too narrow, thinking that that's the only way that you're going to get into this subject in future. For those of you who are interested in science subjects, I think it's a lot easier to keep your options open. So your key subjects are the science subjects, and we include maths in this as well. So for us, biology, chemistry, maths and physics, those are the key science subjects. So when we talk a bit later on about what you would need for certain subjects, and we say which science subjects you need, we're talking about these science subjects. So we wouldn't count psychology as a science when we say here that the keystone subjects are the sciences. If you do want to go into something like maths or physics, computer science, which a lot of you in the Q&A have been asking about, then often further maths is a really good choice as well as your 3rd A level, or for some people a 4th A level if you want to take 4. At Cambridge, we do see further maths as a whole A level by itself. We often get people asking, is it okay if I want to apply for maths and I'm doing maths, physics and further maths? Does further maths count as a 3rd A level? Yes, for Oxford and Cambridge it absolutely does count as a whole A level by itself. We know that a lot of work goes into it. And depending on the course that you're applying for at university, you've got some other options as well. So you can do something like computing, computer science at A level. But again, at most universities, you won't have had to do that in order to go into it at university. So just having something like maths and further maths A levels will put you in really strong stead for doing that at university. Similarly with psychology, you don't have to be taking psychology in order to study that at degree level. We've kind of chatted a bit about the different subjects that you might be considering going into and how to keep your options open. Before I move on to OXBRIDGE subjects, I haven't checked the Q&A yet, but I imagine there will be questions from people saying, I don't know if I want to go into arts, or I don't know if I want to go into sciences. What if I enjoy both? I was absolutely in that situation myself when I was in year 10 and 11 picking A-level subjects, so I can empathise with that. There are ways to keep your options open. As Joe said, it is a lot easier for arts and humanities subjects than sciences. If you do see yourself maybe wanting to do a science subject at university, then it's really good to make sure you're taking at least 2 science subjects at A level. So you can still do 2 science subjects and maybe an arts and humanities subject and still have kind of both routes open to you. But usually by just taking 1 science subject at A level, you end up narrowing down your options at university a lot more in terms of the science subjects. Do you have anything else to add to that, Joe, before we move on to this next bit? I'm happy for you to chip in.
No, I think we're covered everything, and we should go on to the next bit. Which is me anyway. Is it? Yeah. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're just picking on a few interesting courses that Oxbridge offers. We think just because it's very easy to miss some of the more niche courses. And what we want you to do is to research things and just encounter university courses in your spare time and find out about them, because you might discover that's the one that's perfect for you, and you never would have seen it. You never would have come across it if you hadn't done a bit of research. And we do get a lot of candidates who stick with the kind of mainstream courses like law or medicine, whereas actually they probably would have enjoyed other courses more. And these are just Oxbridge examples. And there's like 50,000 other courses in other universities that are also very varied. So there's all kinds of choice out there, and we just love you to be totally kind of on top of the different choices that are available. The next thing I wanted to mention was languages. Lots of people presume that languages is just for people that want to be translators. But Josie takes languages, and my guess is translation is one of the many things she might consider later on in life. So Josie, could you say a little bit about why people might want to consider languages to study at university?
Yeah, I mean, same with most degrees. It's not really just about what you're studying, it's about the skills that you get. So from languages, obviously, yeah, translation is part of it, but you're also analysing the documents you're reading in it. I've been doing too much law today. The text you're reading in English. So you gain analytical skills. We study literature, history, all that sort of stuff. So you gain writing skills, which are basically essential in most jobs. Yeah. So like in your year abroad as well, some people do translation internships, but I know people working for different embassies or for law firms, basically anything. It's probably quite an annoying answer, but you literally can go into anything. And having a language is always a good skill. If you're working for somewhere that has offices in different countries. But yeah, it's not just about what you're learning, it's about the skills that you gain.
Brilliant. And I think that's just so worth bearing in mind, that often for university, we're not saying study chemistry because you want to become a chemist later on in life. We're saying study this course, which you may use directly in your career later. But because you're learning transferable skills, you're learning how to analyze, how to think, how to argue. You can apply that to anything in life later on. So, what Liv was saying about careers and how, they're not so fixed anymore. It just means that your university choice, it can be based more on what you're finding enjoyable, and then you can apply it to whatever you end up doing later. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, we get a lot of people applying for, say, mainstream courses like medicine because they just think, well, I'm a scientist, so it must be the choice for me. But actually, there's a lot of kind of medically related courses out there that you can do where you end up looking at medical related issues, but doing it maybe in a bit more depth or a bit differently. So, and Liv is a living example of that. So Liv, what would you say about biochemistry and maybe why you chose that instead of medicine? What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think when you choose biology, chemistry, maths at A-level, everyone kind of just says like, oh, you can be a doctor with those A-levels, so why don't you? And I think I was lucky enough to do a day of work experience at my local hospital. And for me, I realized from that it was less about the vocation. I think medicine's so vocational, it's about like helping people and like the application of the science in the real world to like better the human race and like look after people. Whereas for me, what I thought interested me about medicine ended up actually being the science and understanding like where that comes from and like how we can like work on research for that. So I think that's why I ended up choosing biochemistry over medicine. It was that I actually thought I don't want to do this vocation, that isn't for me. So I think it's something worth considering, that medicine comes with a lot of other things that you might be able to find in the other biological sciences. yeah, and then I just think biochemistry is great. I just think it's so cool. I think I always come back to it and think, although like sometimes, oh, I don't want to hand in this deadline, when I think about my essay like topic, I'm like, actually, wow, that's so cool. Like, I'd like to know more about that. But yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, and I think if you look at like, if you think of like what's making a difference in the world today, what's had a big impact? Well, like the COVID response, which touches every university subject you can imagine. But if you look at the COVID vaccine people, the people in Oxford that have helped create this vaccine, I'm not sure, I haven't looked it up, but I bet they're not all medics. I bet some of them are biochemists, are kind of virologists and so on. They're all coming at it from slightly different medical related backgrounds. So yeah, and that's gonna, I hope, have an enormous impact on the world. Anyway, so yeah, we just want you to think carefully and to look for those niche courses and see if they're relevant to you. Another thing that quite often happens with university courses is they're specific in that if you look at earth sciences there, what you're doing is you're taking kind of physics and chemistry, a bit of biology, and you're applying it to a specific thing, i.e. the massive rock that we're all standing on. And it's the same with material science. Let's take physics and chemistry and try to understand materials, understand the stuff that surrounds us. Another common thing is look at history-based courses and try and look at a specific time or a particular people. So Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic is like history related, but you're using it to look at a certain set of people and ideas. And same with classics, same with Oriental studies, arguably. So you can use your foundation knowledge and apply it to something really interesting. So yeah, there's lots of kind of nuance out there to discover. Over to Kathryn now, I think.
Thanks, Joe. I was just typing some answers to questions. That brings us to the end of our talking part of the webinar. But before we get into answering some of the questions that have been coming in, I'm just going to put up a few resources on here. If you haven't come along to any of our other webinars before, then do have a little look at our website. We've got lots of recordings up there from the sessions we've done before. There's also a really great website here, Informed Choices, which is organised by the Russell Group universities, so those kind of more research intensive UK universities that I spoke about, and they've got loads of great info on there on how to even find out what university courses are available and how to make A-level choices. So if after this session, I know a few people are saying, I really don't know what to take as my third A-level, I don't know what I'm going to enjoy, I don't know what I want to do at uni. If you're still struggling with those choices, then do have a look on that website. That will be really useful. You can also message a bunch of our students at CATS. I think both Josie and Lawrence are actually on this platform, but we've got an ambassador platform where you can basically message our students at Cambridge with any questions you've got. So if you want to follow them up with any questions, then you're welcome to do that. And then Joe and I have also put our email addresses on here because we know that people inevitably think, oh, I wish I'd answered that question at the end or something like that. If you have forgotten to message us a question or something, feel free to email us afterwards. Speaking of questions, let's get to our Q&A box. I know we've got lots of fab things coming in. Joe, I was going to let you lead the Q&A session for this one. We like to take turns.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just reading through the questions myself, and forgive us if we don't read them all out, but some of them you probably find the answers by Googling easily enough. So I'll try and concentrate on the ones where I think there's like we can get some insight from the student helpers, but do read through yourself because you can upvote them and then I'll know that you're thinking the same thing. I think one of the themes of this session is just this sense of not knowing what you want to do for a career, not knowing what you want to do at university. And I want to preface this by just reminding you that's fine. That's the stage most people will feel at when they're in year 10 and 11. So don't feel like you need to know what you're going to be doing with your life, unless it's deep sea diving, and then you should know. It's just that we want you to think about the options just because it helps you. But anyway, the top question is any advice for someone who has no idea what they want to do at university? And I'd just really like to hear from Josie, Liv and Lawrence, because you're experts. What advice would you give to somebody in that boat? Because it might have been you a couple of years ago.
So I really struggled. So yeah, I was doing French, German, Latin and maths, and I couldn't decide between languages or classics. And yeah, so I spoke to my different teachers and thought and got their input, and obviously they were all kind of promoting their own subject. So it was helpful to see what their experiences of studying the subject. But eventually it did come down to me, and I thought about what I enjoyed more, but also what I was better at, because A-levels and university study, it is quite difficult. So you have to do something that you know that you have the skills for. So although people say do what you enjoy, and normally it's quite similar, I did take the approach of what do I think I can do best, what can I perform better at, because I thought that would help me in the long run. I think also for me, I thought it would be easier to kind of read classical books alongside if I wanted to than to keep up with a language, although both are equally possible. But eventually it did kind of come down to a gut instinct as well. The deadline comes up and you do have to kind of put something down, and you will feel yourself being pulled in a certain direction, but talk to different people, like message students, talk to your teachers, and see what feels right.
I think the first thing that I sort of did was I spent a lot of time on all the uni's websites, and I just sort of like read all the information and just sort of narrowed it down from there. But I think the one thing that I want to emphasize is that just because you choose something for A-level or even uni, there's this extracurricular thing still exists. So I really liked English, and I did a French AS level, and I still like try and get involved with like French, and go to society sort of things, and I still read a lot of books. I think make a choice, but you don't have to give up. But if you like English and science, it doesn't mean that you have to stop doing English. If you choose science A-levels, or even the other way around, you can still get involved. So I think just it's not so permanent, and just go with your gut, like Josie said.
Yeah, I really thought I was going to do economics at university, like straight up economics, but one of the things that sort of ruled me out of that was the fact I didn't choose maths as an A-level choice. So I sort of thought, well, what are my interests in economics? What do I like around economics? And started looking for similar subjects and taster classes. And that's actually how I ended up finding land economy, because as a taster class, I clicked on it thinking, what is land economy? Probably the same as many of you are thinking. Turned up, fell in love with it, and that was my decision there and then that I wanted to do it, and I applied pretty much straight away. But yeah, you can find a degree, you can find yourself maybe not able to do the one that you want perhaps because of choices, but it doesn't necessarily rule you out in terms of being able to do what you're passionate about. Very much a case and example. So yeah, good.
Tremendous, thanks very much. Yeah, and there's a couple of questions that come through, things like, if I want to be an actress, what A-levels should I take? What should I do at university? If I want to be an author, then what A-levels, what university courses should I take? And if you look at actresses and authors and actors, people in drama, people in theatre, people in creative writing, quite a lot of them took a relevant course like creative writing or drama or English at university, but then loads of them didn't. And they did, something random. And then they turned their mind to those kind of creative arts later on in life. So yeah, don't pigeonhole yourself. That you can do, as Liv was saying, you can end up doing anything with your life. And university, although we think it's massively important and really enjoyable, it isn't going to necessarily define you later on. So yeah, try not to be too thinking it's a choice. It's an important choice, but it's not one that's going to tie you down, I wouldn't have thought. Now, we're going to stop this in a minute, but just to say thanks so much to Josie, Lawrence and Liv for their amazing contributions. It's just been brilliant to hear from you. And as always, for Kathryn for being such an expert host. But when we click leave, there will be a post-event survey. Just one more survey. Please, could you fill it in? It'll take you seconds. It'll be so useful to us. So we really want to see your comments, see what you think of a session like this. We've run it, this is the first time, right, Kathryn? So we want to know if it's useful, and if so, how useful. So please do fill in that survey. And yeah, you've got a whole 55 minutes to the football starts, so you can do anything with that time. Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening. Bye.